$10. For many, that's nothing. But for Michael Carter, on that cold night in 2011, it was all he had. Unemployed, broke, and hopeless, he looked at that crumpled bill as if it were a piece of his own dignity. Slipping through his fingers? Rent was overdue, the fridge was empty, and reality weighed heavier than ever before. He could buy something to eat, maybe stretch it out for another day or two. But deep down he knew $10 wouldn't solve his problems, it wouldn't pay his debts, it wouldn't bring his wife back, it wouldn't give him back the life he had lost. So, what to do? Hold on to that money until the last moment, or risk it on something completely uncertain. It was then, while browsing the internet on a borrowed old computer, that he stumbled across an article about something called cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, a virtual currency that promised to revolutionize the financial system. It sounded crazy, something only internet nerds took seriously. But for some reason, that idea kept nagging at him. Michael wasn't a finance expert, let alone a tech whiz, but he had already lost so much that losing $10 wouldn't make a difference. What if it actually worked out? What if, for some absurd reason, that digital money really had a future? With hesitant fingers, he accessed an online platform and bought as much as he could with his $10. 5 Bitcoins. Yes, just that. No expectations, no grand plans. Just one last bet made by a man with nothing to lose. As soon as the transaction was completed, Michael let out a tired sigh and closed the laptop. Done. He had made his choice. But to him, it was nothing more than a curious experiment. Something he would forget in a few days, like so many other small risks he had taken in life. Little did he know that at that moment, without realizing it, he had just changed his story forever. Days turned into weeks. And soon, Michael barely remembered those 5 Bitcoins. After all, his life continued to crumble, and he had far more urgent problems to solve. The overdue rent turned into an eviction, and with nowhere to go, he started sleeping in his car. Cold nights, fogged windows from his breath, hunger gnawing at him. Bitcoin? What difference did a few digital coins make when he didn't even have a roof over his head? Gradually, the few belongings he had left disappeared. He sold the microwave, the phone, his very car. Everything to buy a little more time. But time was never enough. He knocked on the doors of old friends, asked for favors, slept on couches that weren't his. And amidst all this, his old cryptocurrency wallet was left behind, buried among forgotten files and lost passwords. It was a tough few years. He took odd jobs here and there, washed dishes in restaurants, made deliveries, anything that paid for at least a decent lunch. Life was a daily battle, and each day he barely managed to win. If anyone mentioned Bitcoin, he wouldn't even pay attention. To him, it had always been a silly joke, an impulse from a bad day. But then, things began to change. Slowly, but they changed. He landed a steady job, rented a small room, and for the first time in years, he felt like he was getting back on his feet. It was a slow progress, but it was progress. And gradually, he started burying the past. After all, who wants to keep reliving the days when they were hungry and cold? 6 years passed. 6 years. During all that time, he never thought back to that day when he spent his last $10 on an absurd gamble. Until one ordinary afternoon, something made his routine come to a halt. In the back of a diner with a cheap coffee on the table, he heard someone mention the price of Bitcoin. At first, he didn't pay much attention, but then his eyes fell on a TV screen, and he saw the headline that would make his heart race. Bitcoin hits $10,000 per unit. Michael felt his heart race, his eyes glued to the TV screen. He blinked, swallowed hard, trying to process that information. $10,000 for a single Bitcoin. And he had 5. Or rather, he had 5. But did he still have them? Did that digital wallet still exist? His hands began to sweat. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, opened the browser, and tried to remember where he had bought the Bitcoins years ago. But his mind was a mess. What was the site? What email did he use? He had no idea. The only thing he knew was that if he could still access that account, he was about to change his life. He rushed out of the diner. Once home, he started rummaging through everything. Old papers, forgotten notebooks, scribbled notes. But there was nothing. No clues, no notes about that purchase. Desperation grew. Every drawer overturned, every cabinet emptied, and nothing. What if he had lost millions of dollars just because he couldn't remember a code? Hours passed. Michael sat on the floor, his hands on his head, feeling the weight of frustration. How could he have been so careless? 6 years living in misery, not knowing that all this time he could have been a millionaire. It felt like fate was playing a cruel joke on him, a cruel irony. The fortune was there, within reach, but he didn't know how to grab it. Then he changed tactics. He opened old emails, tried to remember passwords, searched through forgotten conversations, but nothing. The name of the platform, the access key, all lost to time. It was like trying to recall an old dream, something he knew had happened, but he couldn't visualize clearly anymore. Until, suddenly, a memory came rushing back. The old laptop, an ancient computer he hadn't used in years, gathering dust at the back of his closet. Back then, he always jotted down important things on it. What if the password was there? His heart raced. He dashed to the closet, pulled out the laptop, and set it on the table. He pressed the power button. Nothing. Tried again? Nothing. The computer wouldn't turn on anymore. Now what? The laptop wouldn't boot. Michael pressed the button repeatedly, as if by sheer insistence it would miraculously spring back to life. But nothing happened. The screen remained dark, silent, indifferent to his despair. What if that computer was his only chance to recover his fortune? What if the password that separated him from millions of dollars was locked inside? He tried everything. Removed the battery, plugged it in, gently tapped the side as if he were dealing with an old television set. But this wasn't a movie, and technology didn't bend to his will. The laptop was dead, and with it, perhaps his only chance to become rich was gone too. But Michael wasn't ready to give up. He grabbed the laptop and hurried out, walking the streets as if he were carrying a locked vault without a key. He found an electronics repair shop and walked in without a second thought. "How long will it take to try and recover the data?" he asked, trying to hide his nervousness. The technician looked at the old device and replied, "It depends. It could take a few hours, or it might be lost forever." The wait was torturous. Michael could hardly breathe. Every minute felt like an eternity. He tried to distract himself, but his mind kept repeating one thought. What if the password was there? What if inside that computer was the evidence that the years of suffering were just a long intermission before his redemption? After what felt like centuries, the technician finally returned. He held an external hard drive and said, "We managed to recover some files." Michael's heart nearly stopped. He took the device with trembling hands and rushed home. As soon as he got there, he connected the hard drive to his computer and began to open the folders. Old documents, photos from better times, scattered notes. And then he saw it, a text file with a strange name. He clicked on it. And there it was. A code. The sequence of characters that could change his life? The password for the Bitcoin wallet, but would it still work? Michael stared at that code as if he were looking at a winning lottery ticket. But was it really? If that password was wrong, all the hope he had recovered in the last few hours would come crashing down. What if he had written it down incorrectly? What if the platform where he bought the Bitcoins didn't even exist anymore? His mind was filled with doubts, but there was only one way to discover the truth. With trembling hands, he typed the digital wallet address into the browser. The site loaded slowly. It felt like a portal to another world, a world where he could be a millionaire, or continue being just Michael Carter, the guy who lost everything. He took a deep breath and clicked on Login. The screen asked for the private key. He returned to the text file, copied the code, and pasted it into the password field. It was now or never. Each heartbeat felt louder than the click of the enter button. He pressed it. The screen kept loading for a few seconds. And then something happened. The site didn't display an error. There was no incorrect password message. On the contrary, a new panel appeared before his eyes. He had successfully logged in. But Michael still didn't know what he would find inside. The next sight made his body freeze. There, on the screen, was the balance of his account. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake. The number was too large, too frightening. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, trying to understand if he was interpreting it correctly. The balance showed $80 million. The same man who had gone hungry, slept in cars, lost everything, was now a multimillionaire. And all because, years ago, he spent his last $10 on something he barely understood. Michael stood there, frozen, staring at the screen. $80 million. It was a number that made no sense. It felt like a mistake, a cruel twist of fate. How could a man who, until yesterday, counted coins to buy food, now possess a fortune he could scarcely imagine? His chest rose and fell too quickly. It was a mix of euphoria, shock, and an inexplicable fear. He grabbed his phone, opened the banking app, and entered the account details. He needed to be sure this was real. With absurd nervousness, he transferred $1 million to his bank account, hit enter, and find out if his life had changed forever. The site confirmed the transaction. The money had been sent. Michael held his breath. Now it was just waiting. The minutes felt like hours. He sat there, staring at his phone screen as if he were about to witness a miracle or a disaster. Then a notification popped up. He blinked, unable to believe what he saw. He opened the banking app, and there it was. Available balance, $1 million. In his account. For real. Michael dropped his phone on the table and held his head in his hands. He was rich. Not in theory, not as a distant number in a digital wallet. He was truly rich. The man who had slept in his car, who lived on favors, who had endured cold and hunger, was now a millionaire. In the following days, he drove aimlessly around the city. He passed by the building where he lived before being evicted. He saw the diner where he used to ask for credit. Places that represented suffering now seemed so small compared to what he held in his hands. And then, for the first time in years, Michael cried. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Because after so long, just surviving, he could finally begin to live. Months passed, and Michael watched his fortune grow even more. Bitcoin continued to rise, and before he knew it, he wasn't just a millionaire. He was a billionaire. But unlike what many would do, he didn't go out buying mansions, luxury cars, or extravagant jewelry. He knew what it was like to lose everything. He understood what it meant to have nothing. The first thing he did was take care of his mother. He bought her a comfortable house, paid off all her debts, and ensured she would never have to worry about money again. Then, discreetly, he helped a few friends who had once offered him a couch to sleep on. He didn't want attention. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted to give back. Michael also invested in the city where he had suffered so much. He donated money to shelters, funded educational programs, and helped small businesses get back on their feet. But he did everything anonymously. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't want to be recognized as the former poor man who became rich overnight. He just wanted to ensure that others had a better chance than he did. The media discovered his story. Major newspapers wanted to interview him. TV shows wanted his presence, but he turned them all down. Money buys comfort, but it doesn't buy peace, he would say. All he wanted was a quiet life. No excesses, no extravagance, just freedom. And that was the greatest lesson Michael learned. The true value of money isn't in what you can buy, but in what it can provide you. And for him, the greatest gift was never having to worry about tomorrow again, never having to sleep in his car, never feeling hungry again, never depending on luck to survive. He continued to live simply, as if he were still that man who spent $10 on a meaningless gamble. The difference was that now he had choices. He had security. He had what had seemed impossible for so many years, peace. And so, without scandals, without headlines, Michael Carter faded from the world's radar. But somewhere, a man who once had nothing now had everything that truly mattered. Michael's story proves something powerful. A single decision can change everything. Often what seems insignificant today may be what defines your future. He didn't know that $10 would transform his life, but he had the courage to take the risk. And above all, he had the patience for fate to unfold. How many opportunities do we let slip away because we think they're too small? How many times do we give up without even trying? Michael only discovered his fortune because he didn't forget where he came from and had the courage to look back. Sometimes our treasure is already with us. We just need to find it. Now tell me, if you discovered you had a forgotten fortune, what would be the first thing you'd do? Leave your comment down below because I really want to know. Oh, and if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. See you in the next video.